Yeah, I suppose I've always wanted to be a writer. I could go back to to my age at 9, and the bugger bit me then, and that was during the war. That was about 1941. We were a family who lived in the Midlands, Stoke-on-Trent. We had a bungalow at the top of a very ordinary street on the edge of Stoke-on-Trent, and I had a brother, Tom, who was 4 years older than me. He'll come into this very much, and then my sister Mary, who was 4 years older than him, but she was often away because women were called up, you know, and she was in the fire service, and she would arrive just long enough to tell us how the men were running it disastrously, and women could run it better, and then she'd be off again, you know. But we had a air raid shelter in the back garden that I'd helped my father to put up. The government sent an incredible scheme. They sent every family, millions of families, these steel plates that you bolted together. You dug a hole about 3 foot deep, you slid the thing into the hole, there's a book of instructions, and you tightened all the nuts, and then you've got this rounded shaped steel shelter with a front on it, back on it, enough room in there possibly for 6 people to just squeeze, if you put bunks, you know, and it was an amazing piece of design and an amazing effort to get it out to people. The only unfortunate thing is that most people didn't get bombed, of course, you know.
Well, I mean, say in the
bombing was very concentrated, yeah. And we never got bombed like they got bombed in Coventry or London, but we did get bombed. And after a while you got fed up with going down to the shelter because it was cold and it was wet, and loads of frogs lived down there and all that. There's a field drain, and they used to pop up out of the field drain. You see their eyes in the dark. And my brother and I used to go and stand on a hill just nearby to see the city burning. Buggers that we were, you know. I mean, we took, it was as though we were watching a firework display, you know. There's all the incendiaries burning the city from end to end, you know, the sound of fire engines and all that, planes going over. And on one occasion we were standing up there, and for once a German plane came over very low, incredible din, and dropped a stick of bombs just at random. In order, we learnt afterwards it was trying to pick up speed because it was being pursued by a British night fighter, you know.
Just dropping its payload.
Yeah, just dropped them. And they dropped about 2 streets away from us and blew us off our feet, you know, and we got up and raced back home to the safety of the shelter, laughing hysterically but really inwardly panicked, you know. So there were times like that when the war sort of impinged on us, you know. But there was a fairly quiet edge of things, you know, where the war was kind of distant. I know my brother went down to see the result of the bombing raid down a couple of streets away, and he went on his bike and he saw a human hand lying in the road, you know, just a severed hand, a woman's hand, and he just was sick, you know, came back deeply shocked. Something very strange when suddenly it becomes people being blown to bits and so forth, you know. Anyway, because of this situation, when he and I, Tom and I, shared a bedroom in the bungalow, and you went to bed always expecting that you might have to get up again round about midnight or so, when the Germans would usually come over obligingly at roughly the same time. They'd come over just about between 11 o'clock and midnight, and they'd stay a couple of hours bombing and so forth, and they'd go, you know. That was the usual scheme of things. But our parents used to bang on the wall to tell us to shut up round about, I don't know, 11 o'clock probably. But we used to carry on whispering, you know, and talking about all kinds of things, what friends had done, school, all that stuff. And then my brother had an idea. He said, I've got an idea. He said, we ought to organise this. He said, I'll tell a story one night and you tell a story the next. a story and then you tell a story, and we'll alternate in that way. I was about 9 years old, and I could tell you the absolute joy with which I heard this, you know, and realised that I think I'd scribbled a few things down and never finished them. But I never thought of telling a story, you know. But it seemed like the thing, you know, I wanted to do for life. And so, exciting when, you know, came the first night and he told his story, but I wasn't that impressed by it. It was a bit sort of, I thought, a bit dull, really, and full of sort of boring things that had happened and so forth. And I thought, just let him wait until I tell my story, you know, which is full of flights of imagination and amazing magic things. So I started my story the next night, and I only done a couple of sentences, and he said, no, he said, this isn't the idea. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, when I said tell a story, he said, it's got to be things that have happened. He said, you mustn't make it up. He said, I don't want you making it up. He said, go back and start again, he said, and just tell me things that have happened to you during the day. And I was really devastated, you know. The whole thing fell to bits, and I stumbled along trying to cobble together things about school and so forth, and every now and then embellishing them a bit because they seemed so dull. But he would always stop me and say, no, you made that up. You know, he'd had to go back a few words and go on. And I became a writer. He became an inspector of police, right, in the Midlands, yeah. And I can imagine him, you know, interrogating some luckless petty criminal, and every now and then he'd say, no, you made that up. But the thing is, why I think of this is that it's a very basic thing in writing, that you're probably not going to get by on imagination, pure imagination at all. It has to be a mixture of reality and imagination. And so the very, very basic thing of writing was what he was saying, you know. And I sort of absorbed that in the way I suppose a child does. And as I went along, around about the age of 15, I decided I wanted to be a playwright, not just a writer, but a playwright.